Money Radio, discussing the business of making and spending money.
Hello, viewers. We are here once again, and the program is Energy Sector on your program, on your television, Leadership Television, and this is Money Radio segment of the show. My name is Winifred Ubebo, and sure feels good to be host to you on today's program. And of course, as usual on the program, we have our in-house guest. She is the group business editor of Leadership Business, and her name is Inse Anthony Uko.
Thank you.
Inse, thank you so much once again, and welcome to the program. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Whereas we are looking at urgent issues before the newly inaugurated Ministers of State Petroleum. Last Monday or this Monday, the President Bola Tinubu inaugurated his cabinet. He swore in the ministers nominee and their various cabinets, ministries they are going to be heading. So we are starting up with this program, looking at what are the issues before these ministers, especially Ministers of State for Petroleum Resources. And by the way, Inse, just like we've had previously 8 years under President Muhammadu Buhari, President Bola Tinubu is also heading, is the de facto minister of Petroleum Resources.
Has that been announced? Has it been made official?
Because he has not made any appointment for a substantive minister to head the Petroleum Resources
though it
and
hasn't
gas.
been officially announced, but with the writing on the wall seems to suggest that he is going to head that ministry. However, he has appointed 2 ministers of state who will be helping coordinate the affairs of the ministry. And he has even, gone ahead to kind of bring a split to ensure maybe more widespread coverage of activities within.
Okay. Now, the topic today is urgent issues before the Ministers of State Petroleum Resources. Now, of course, the newly inaugurated ministers are actually having their key performance indicators. What are they going to be looking at now that they have been inaugurated, they have been sworn in?
Yeah, for the first time in the Petroleum Resources Ministry, we are seeing a situation where we have 2 ministers or 2 ministers of state. There's one for oil, so the designation is Minister of State Petroleum Resources Oil, and that's Senator Heineken Lokobure. And then we have Minister of State Petroleum Resources Gas, and that is Ekperikwe Eko. So for the both of them, they seem to have their jobs cut out for them, because there are so many issues ongoing within this economy right now, and that hinges on energy, on petrol. On one hand, we see the recent removal of petroleum subsidy and all the attendant issues it has brought up for Nigeria and for Nigerians. And then on the other hand, we see a major ingredient that is needed for power generation, and it's coming from the second minister, and the supply of gas to generation companies. So these are very salient issues that will ensure that the energy needs of Nigerians, whether be it for transportation or be it for electricity, are met.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, a lot is going to be expected, or a lot is expected from these ministers. For instance, a report carried it today. I saw a report that under gas, that Nigeria was losing so much money. I've forgotten the actual figure now, under through gas flaring. Perhaps it's something that the new minister has to look into.
Yes, the issue of gas flaring is actually something that is salient for Nigeria, especially with the current trend now, that whereby Nigeria has declared that gas is a transition fuel in line with the global energy transition agenda. And a lot of those companies are still flaring gas because of the huge investment that is needed for them to set in place adequate infrastructure that will enable them to harness most of these gas resources. And then this is not a good signal for Nigeria being more of a gas nation. Nigeria has gas reserves that will last for upward of
60 years,
60 years, 80 years,
that.
while that of crude oil is even far less at 30 years reserve that will last for 30 years.
Okay.
So
in other words, our crude is depleting.
Not that it's depleting, but Nigeria has much more gas reserves than crude oil.
Okay.
So, but all this while, the potential in gas has not been fully harnessed. Nigeria is not even getting enough for consumption within the country. 60% of gas is still being LPG, that is cooking gas, is still being imported into the country.
Wow.
Then on natural gas, we see a situation where electricity generating companies, we have gas powered thermals contributing 80% of the on-grid power generation. And right now the number
So
one
what you just pointed out, sorry if I have to, that is like somebody that is living by the riverside and is thirsty.
Yes, and
It's
there
thirsty
is
for
and
water
there is no
when-
water to drink.
So, and yet river is close by.
Of course, that is the situation that Nigeria has found itself in for so many years, that we begin to wonder why this is so. At times, I actually begin to think that, is this country under some kind of curse? Because the potentials are enormous. Nigeria has no reason to be having gas scarcity. In fact, Nigeria is more like a beautiful bride. When the issue between Ukraine and Russia threw up a huge gas deficit of gas supply, so many European countries, they were just trooping into Nigeria. Nigeria, the beautiful bride, we have so much gas reserves, but the ability to harness these resources, and then you know what it portends, the huge financial implication for the country being able to generate enough revenue from this huge resource deposit, and then also being able to harness it, one for our power generation industry, and then for local consumption. So it's a thing that it's a big issue for us here in Nigeria, and I'm sure that is why the president Bola Tinubu, in his wisdom, decided that this is not a responsibility that should be saddled on one person. There should be two ministers in their distinct roles, so that they will be able to focus properly on what is their assigned duties and ensure that Nigerians can actually get
the best
out of huge resources.
Thank you so much. Now, still talking on gas, what is actually the problem? Is it the financial investment that is required, or the technical know-how to be able to harness this gas that we have right in our backyard?
The issue here is that many of the international oil companies who are licensees to the oil wells and the oil fields, they came primarily for the crude oil. And as at the time they were setting up their infrastructure, a lot of them, in fact most of them, if not all, the infrastructure they were putting on ground was to explore oil. And then the gas resources was not harnessed. their own plan was, okay, the gas, we don't really need it, so they allow it to waste, they flay it. And up till now we are still seeing the higher numbers of gas being flayed. And then, okay, by the time Nigeria realized that this gas is a huge resource, it's even more huge than the crude, we need to have this gas and next for our own use in country and for exporting to earn foreign currency for the country. It means it now threw up the issue of infrastructure, a whole different kind of infrastructure, in terms of pipelines, in terms of machineries, equipment are needed for the production of this gas. So for this same, if the same oil companies now want to, begin to produce gas, they'll have to put in place, bring in fresh investment in that area. And at that point too, Nigeria was not quick in setting up the laws that will sanitize the system, provide rules, guidelines, laws that meet up with international best practices. And so while for 20 years Nigeria was dilly-dallying over the passing of the Petroleum Industry Bill into an act, many of the oil companies, they didn't feel comfortable enough to be able to bring in fresh investment. And at the time Nigeria ended up passing this act, this bill into an act, energy transition are setting. The global community is like, we have to move away from the use of fossil fuels. And we even have we have the Russia-Ukraine situation to thank, because otherwise the EU wouldn't even agree that consent to the fact that gas can be a transition fuel. So that is a plus for Nigeria right now, which means that a lot needs to be done in that area to ensure that for the time, this like extra time that Nigeria has been given, that it still has opportunity to harness much from this sector.
Yes, thank you so much. Sorry to cut in. It's time for us to go on a break. When we come back, we are going to be looking at more issues before the ministers of state for petroleum resources. And don't go away, just stay tuned until we come back.
Be part of our brand. Leadership for God and country.
Welcome back. In case you're just joining in, the program is Energy Sector on Money Radio, reaching you on Leadership Television. My name is Winifred Bebo, and of course you can see, as I always have in the studio, she is an in-house analyst, and of course the group business editor of Leadership Media Group, and she's Inse Anthony Ugo. Inse, thank you so much once again. It's always a pleasure to have you, an expert on the energy beat, talking to us. Now back to, the topic has been the urgent issues before the ministers of state for petroleum resources. Last Monday, that's 3 days ago, the President Bola Tinubu inaugurated his cabinet with ministers having their portfolio. So we are looking at what are the issues before these ministers. Though for now, President Bola Tinubu is yet to announce the substantive minister for both ministries, but we are hoping that maybe in due time he will do that. But in case he doesn't do that, maybe like his predecessor Buhari and of course former President Obasanjo, who were substantive ministers, maybe he also intends to hold that position. But for now, we are looking at what are the issues actually before the ministers of state, petroleum resources. Now we are talking about gas. Back before we left, we were looking at the issues of harnessing this gas for our local consumption. And now there are so many now, like with the discovery of some crude oil in some select states of the nation. And we also have this gas also coming up. So will Nigeria continue to fold its hands and not do something about these gas reserves? Do you think so? What has been the latest development?
Of course, Nigeria is not folding its hands. Like I mentioned before, in 2021, the decade of gas was launched. And then with that launching, for the entirety of this decade.
And the decade has elapsed.
No, it has,
okay,
2021.
Okay.
So the decade is to 2030.
Okay.
By this time, Nigeria is expected to be able to fully or substantially utilize its gas reserve, the proven gas reserves. However, under the previous administration, we saw that I think because of all the responsibilities being saddled on one person, it was somehow difficult for those things to be done simultaneously somehow. So Nigeria's focus has been much on crude, and so with the issues of oil theft and the rest, it was, and then meeting up with Nigeria's production quota, the former Minister of State and activities within that sector during in the last dispensation was on oil and on crude. So now is the time with a ministry that is focusing entirely on gas. So now it is left for him to follow through with plans. I, for one, would I hope that I wouldn't see a situation where most of the plans that have been put into place, all the policies that have been set up, all the strategies that have been the development plan that we have documented, that this will not be jettisoned. Because a situation whereby they are jettisoned and then they begin to formulate a fresh plan, it will be a setback. But however, we have seen the president, even before the ministers came on board, coming up with a presidential CNG initiative. Before now, we also had a CNG initiative on ground, the auto gas policy. So it's like the former policy on that on compressed natural gas has been somehow jettisoned, and another one is coming up. So I'm hoping that this wouldn't be the situation, because it will be like drawing the country back. The plans have been formulated, the what needs to be done, timelines, sort of tentative timelines were given and all that. If Nigeria begins to draw up a fresh plan, if a fresh gas development plan, it will be a huge setback. And then with all the decade of gas, even a decade of gas secretariat was launched last month.
Okay, just last month. That's just exactly what I was going to ask you. That it's 2 years now after the launching of decade of gas, and what has really been
that's exactly what we were asking. And that if after 2 years after the launch of the decade of gas, we were just seeing a secretariat being inaugurated, being commissioned just last month. So that's an indication that a lot are not, the decade of gas project initiative had not moved the way it should have moved. If a journey of 10
10 years.
years, and by the first 2 years you've hardly taken any step, then it means that at the end of the day, if the pace continues like that, at the end of the decade, you will look back and not much. It will be another missed target that Nigeria is giving to Africa. But however, with the issue of gas, Nigeria needs to, the minister needs to realize that time is of essence.
But in your own words, what do you think is actually drawing us back?
There is need for provision of adequate incentives for many of the operators in this sector are crying out for is gas pricing. Right now, there is no deregulated gas pricing. The federal government, I think, because of the need to supply gas to power generating companies, the federal government still fixes the gas of price.
Okay, it's not deregulated.
It's not deregulated, and so a lot of these operators are like that. Deregulating the price of gas will be a huge incentive for many people who will want to invest in that sector to bring in money, and so that has been dragging things down. In fact, at the inauguration of that decade of gas secretariat, that was the major thing, the major issue that the private sector operators who were there were clamoring for, that the pricing mechanism for gas should be reviewed to meet with international standards. And of course, if that is also done if that is handled the way the subsidy on petrol was handled, you can imagine the consequence that will have during this.
All right, thank you so much. So, in your own words, what is the way forward? You just talked about the prospect, the challenges that is hindering the actualization of harnessing our natural gas. Now, what is the way forward? What do you propose to the new Minister of State for Gas now?
The minister needs to look critically into this clamor by the stakeholders, especially concerning the issue of pricing, because investment is of essence. A huge investment is necessary, is needed, and this investment wouldn't be done by the government. They are meant to be private sector driven, and where the private sector feels that they don't have adequate incentives on the part of government to go into this, they will not do anything. If we draw a case from the issue of marginal refinery licenses that were given out, most of those marginal refineries that were supposed to refine petrol for different areas, most of them did not go into petrol refining. A lot of them, they concentrated on refining diesel and AGO, and aviation fuel, whose prices were already deregulated, so that they will be able to make it even, that they will be able to operate profitably. So where subsidy exists, it's a kind of a dampening effect on investment. So on the other hand, the government, there's need also to make gas available for generators, for electricity generation.
Yes,
at a rate that is not there is not too much for them. So governments need to strike a balance. I would say maybe like in the case of crude oil, where a certain percentage of crude oil is left for local refining, the government the minister can look at a situation where a certain percentage is allocated to this, and that they can get at the price that both the stakeholders will sit and agree on as a concession for power generation. In this case now, they are funding production, they are subsidizing production, not consumption, like the case of petrol subsidy, so that a lot more people can come in, invest, and boost up this. Look at the cases of cars, the CNG for cars and all that. It's planned as an alternative to fuel, a much cheaper alternative. But if it begins, a lot of people turn to CNG when there is not much in supply. We will end up like petrol, because the price will go up when the demand is higher than the supply, and we will have the situation like the petrol on our hands once again. So those things need to be looked at critically and ensure that by the time decisions are being taken on this, and again, time is of essence. That is one thing the minister must put
to hit the ground running.
Yes, to hit the ground running and know that Nigeria does not have time. This is like working on a borrowed time. Energy transition is here. The West virtually wants to put an end to everything fossil related, and gas is still fossil related. However, it can be harnessed in a cleaner manner than crude. So let's make the most of it while we still can.
All right. Another one is make hay while the sun shines. Thank you so much for your thoughts on that. And of course, this is all these views. I hope the Minister of State is listening in for gas. Our viewers, this is where we come to the end of today's program, Energy Sector on Money Radio. So reaching you on Leadership Television. Today we had a focus on the gas, Ministers of State issues, urgent issues before the Ministers of State and Petroleum Resources, and that is gas. Next week we are also going to be focusing on petrol. Until we come your way again, same time next week, I'm your friend Bebo, and it was a pleasure having you on the program. Look forward to seeing you same time next week. This is where we end today's program. See you then. Bye.
Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.